implication of what stigma has on local communities. Stay tuned for that and much more.
Absolutely, and welcome to the show. Today is the 17th day of August. It happens to be World Humanitarian Day, and we're also going to be taking a focus and a look at that, and we'll also be inviting you to let us know if you know some people who've gone out of their way, their usual call of duty to ensure that we are in a better world today. We'll be highlighting on that, and right now, as we look at the dailies, later on you'll also be seeing we've got Umra Omar, who has done exactly that. Details will be coming up as we go along. But of course, part of what we're going to be discussing is what's been happening in the Senate. And on the headlines, we're going to be looking at that. But also we have a question that we'd like you to participate in. And we're asking for you to share your views on the events surrounding the prolonged Senate standoff over revenue sharing. Share your views on the events surrounding the prolonged Senate standoff over revenue sharing. The hashtag is KTN Morning Express. Trix is at Trixingado. I am at Michael G. Gitonga. Do tweet us and let us know what your thoughts are surrounding that particular standoff that has been going on, as it also forms part of the headlines this morning with the Deputy President and the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga coming against what happened recently. We all know that we had senators who were arrested and taken to their counties, which happened to be on the same day that they were supposed to be voting. Today also happens to be the day that hopefully Senate are going to get over that stalemate of the revenue sharing formula, which has been a bone of contention. That and much more right here on Morning Express. But as usual, we're going to start by looking at what's making headlines on the dailies. And joining me to do that, we have none other than Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, who's the Member of Parliament for Nambale, who is joining us. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning, sir.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
All right. And we'll go straight to the dailies. And today we have both papers more or less looking and highlighting the same thing. We have the Standard saying, "Stop the madness," says Raila and Ruto. We have the Daily Nation, Ruto, Raila criticize state over arrest. Let me start, first of all, as a legislator, to just get your thoughts on what happened recently. And this, of course, is the arrest of 3 senators and them being released without being charged per se, which, of course, leaves a lot to be desired. Just to hear your thoughts on that before we dig into what the other leaders had to say.
Thank you very much, Michael. I think that was one of the lowest points Kenya has gotten into in the recent past. Kenya had been there before. Kenya was there before in the 70s, in the Jomo Kenyatta regime, was there during the Moi regime. But everybody had thought that was a matter of the past. It's a tactic that is very crude, that's used by regimes across the world, and was a bit shocking that the advisors of the president, or whoever the handlers are, allowed this to happen. This happens usually when there isn't easy communication between the chief executive and his aides. And I think they lie through their way. They would have known from the NIS and other intelligence chains that this is an issue that is very emotive, that Wananchi are waiting for a solution that would last. And a solution that lasts cannot be handled the way they did. I think they botched it completely.
Come up, of course, out of this, one of them being the fact that the deputy president, the second in command, is criticizing what happens, which, I mean, more or less lets us know that he is not aware. Then, of course, the question remains, who is aware and who is behind all this?
That's a difficult answer. I think a vague answer would be to say the deep state is not. That has become a new vocabulary for us.
Deep state, yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you. Carry on.
Yes. Okay. We can easily, vaguely say it's the deep state, meaning usually someone's using the security apparatus that the government would use others to keep the state safe to conduct this kind of thing. And in so doing, probably think they're pleasing somebody. Or maybe now that we are governing with outsiders, who have a say in what's happening in government, and elected people without any basis or any authority, it is possible that they're listening to those kinds of characters. It's difficult to say, but whatever the case is, the outcome is deplorable. The outcome is just not where Kenya should be. It's a huge setback, and events like this don't go away quickly. So I really do hope that we'll get a statement, maybe from the head of state himself, as for what he thinks happened. I think he has to exonerate himself from this. Otherwise, I think it's absolutely destabilizing.
All right, and of course, one of the things that we are accused of as Kenyans is forgetting very quickly. And whereas this, assuming that maybe Senate managed to get a breakthrough in that, stalemate that they have had for a long time today, we're likely to sweep this under the carpet, but the overreaching effects of what happened are worrying, given that we've been fighting for democracy for such a long time. And to see this happen now and just ignore it or let it be becomes worrying, because that takes us back way to where we are coming from. What are your thoughts on how we can address this and ensure that it just doesn't go away just like that?
Michael, I think the only way, first of all, this issue has become a household issue, so to say. People across the country have known that there are winners and there are losers. I think that what brought in the winners and losers is that they did not consider a phased entry into this issue. So even if they reach some solution, because people have been either intimidated or been persuaded to vote otherwise, there will still be the issue of losers and winners. And we are nearing elections. This is going to take a little while to get away. In my view, as I had said earlier on this show, that the phasing in of this formula has to take time. And you can define that perhaps, and that is one of the amendments on the floor, I think, by Senator Petronila Were, that the incremental allocations that come in beyond 316, or maybe it was somebody else's amendment, going forward, be the one that is subjected to formula of this kind, which means the Manderas or others who have got whatever 17 billion, whatever the figure is, that will not go down, but that the growth of the others will rise, and the inequities that are seen would be reduced significantly. So it would be, so to say, a win-win solution. You stay where you are. We don't take that away, even if the new formula would have said you take it away. But let us use the formula in the amount that grows beyond 316.5.
All right.
There's no miracle around 16.5, by the way, and we can talk about that.
Okay, yeah, it's not a magic figure, so of course they can work around it. But away from the formula, there is also the worry and the concern of what happened to the senators. And this is not something that's just happened. It's not a one-off. Recently, we saw a woman who was literally brutally beaten in City Hall as she was going about her duties, so to speak. But the problem is that if we let this be, if we let this just go, then we literally are clawing back on the Constitution 2010. It leaves a very worrying state of affairs if we do not have this addressed properly.
Yeah, absolutely, you're spot on. The brutality in City Hall was completely out of this world. In the olden days, when you're dealing with women, it's the women officers who handle women. You can't get 4 muscular men brutalizing not just a woman, but a little woman, carrying her around by the hair and using excessive force. You could see how far back they moved their big stick and how they landed on her. That, I think, is absolutely unforgivable. And I would expect, yes, and awful. I expect that first and foremost, the officer should be set out of the force. They should be dismissed. They can't be punished in another way, maybe even including prosecution, so that the courts can decide what's the best ultimate punishment. But they must really be out of their jobs. That's absolutely horrendous. And now you can see they get away with that. Now you get others who go arrest the senators and treat them like common criminals just for drama. And as soon as the vote day is finished, then they release them. What are they going to do next time around? Arrest others? Intimidate others? I think the setback of democracy is deep. It's very deep, and I think it's something that government should worry about.
Absolutely. All right, and maybe we'll look at other stories. That is the main story there. Stop the Madness, says Raila and Ruto. And this, of course, is in light of the arrest that took place as the voting was supposed to be done in Senate. And we had the 3 senators released without charge, which, of course, leaves a lot to be desired when we look at democracy. We are in a democratic country, and things like that should not be happening now, according to those leaders. And we are engaging you in that with a Twitter poll question where we are are asking what your thoughts are in what has been happening in the Senate. Today happens to be the day that they're also going to be going back to Senate to see whether they can, have that impasse sorted out once and for all. But looking at other stories that are in the dailies today, on page 2, we have a story there. Treasury bailed the rich to buy posh vehicles as the poor skipped meals. This is mainly looking at some of the formulas that have come out and what Treasury had done. And given that the disparity we have as a country, we evidently can see the gap between the poor and the rich is so wide and continues to grow that even during the pandemic, we still had the rich still able to walk, according to this article, walk into, a showroom and buy a brand new Porsche car, whereas we have the poor who continue to skip meals as they wonder how this is going to go out. As an economist, maybe give us your thoughts on how we'll ever get out of this. We've been trying to fight poverty eradication since independence. More than 50 years on, we still have not done that.
Michael, this reminds me of what I used to see in India some years back. In India, there had been a rule about what vehicles government officials can use, and they used exclusively the vehicles that were assembled locally. If you saw Mercedes on the Benz Mercedes-Benz on the road in those days, those were by the private sector and the embassies. But now in Kenya, we got to a point where we say the guzzlers, the big vehicles would be taken off, would not be used by government. They would no longer procure them. It turned out just to be a lie, because now we are back with the vengeance, and this is all at taxpayers' expense. Not only the purchase, it's also the use. Even if it's a private car, but you're using a government-provided loan or facility to purchase that, I think it's a waste of money. That money could be used to do other things. And we can see now with COVID that there are very many areas that it could support, not just in the health, but in livelihoods. So I think it is something that the president, who had spoken about this a few years ago, should come out clearly with an executive order that can be implemented. And the vehicle should be taken off the road and disposed of, not kept in a corner someplace to be used from time to time. What is the package of a CS when we become a CS? What kind of expenditures are they are supported by the state and the permanent secretaries, and of course the parliamentarians and all the public officials? What are they? I think they should be really, I know they have used that for parliamentarians, but usually with the political bent, but just basically and soberly, what's the package of a PS? How much money does he get to buy a vehicle? I think it's somewhere in the range of 14 or 15 million. Obviously, the direction there is the kind of vehicle they should buy, clearly, at the government expense. Yes, they do pay, but you pay over how many years? Maybe 5 years. That money could have been used now for something else. Just the weekend, I was home, and my local dispensary has had no medicines for months now, literally, including the most basic ones. 14 million shillings could run my whole sub-county probably for several months. So there are a lot of things that are contradictory in this, but they all point towards a decadence in terms of disregard for values and a disconnect from the population.
All right, and I do remember, Uhuru Kenyatta, when he was Minister of Finance, at some point gave a directive that there will be no guzzlers. I think at that point they were driving Passats. Absolutely. And that seems to have clawed back. But maybe so that we, put our money where our mouth is, would you mind telling us what car do you drive as a legislator?
Yes, I don't mind telling you now. I drive a Toyota Land Cruiser.
Those are the guzzlers we're talking about. Is it necessary to have a Toyota Land Cruiser?
Absolutely. It is the system, yes, absolutely.
But then you're saying that we should, use cars that are not guzzlers, but as a legislator, that's exactly what you're using. So one might say that you're talking from two sides of the mouth.
No, not really. First, remember that as a legislator, the work that I have to do when I go back, the roads, even with the four-wheel drive, you can't get through sometimes during the rain season. So you do need strong vehicles to manage that. Each time I rent a car, when I go home or use my wife's car for the duties that I do, in the bad roads, you're going to knock something, break something, and so on. So even with this so-called four-wheel drives, it's still a problem. But what I'm saying is that we do need to...
Isn't that where the problem is, Honorable Bunyasi? And the reason why I bring this up is because If your way of fixing the road is buying another car, how many people can afford that? What we would as Kenyans expect is that rather than get a 4x4, is get that road fixed so that it's equal for everybody. Not everybody can afford a 4x4.
Absolutely. But let me bring in now the relevance on the debate, even relating to that of the revenue sharing arrangements, that the use of our budget resources, for example, the treatment that we have got, is not just about 316 billion of it, which is less than 10% or about 10%, it's in the 90%. How do we allocate resources so that we can improve the road infrastructure for everybody? That will lower transport costs, it will lower even fares and so on. You're right, absolutely. There is a big debate out there. But, you know, as Michael, there must be a clear policy stance that affects everybody. Once it's agreed, it goes down for everybody. I know my colleagues who come, for example, from the northeastern part, who drive a large part of it. It would actually be very difficult for them to use vehicles other than fairly heavy vehicles to get to their places. Those roads will take generations almost to get done. So I agree with you. The solution is not to buy another vehicle. Many people don't even have vehicles.
Right.
The solution is to improve roads so that the motorbikes, the matatus, and everybody can lower their transport cost.
Absolutely. And also ensure that we have an equal playing field for everybody. But away from that, and on page 3, it's a bit of silver lining on the cloud, how virus gave dying factories a lifeline after years of losses. And this is factories that have now been revived with making of PPEs and face masks. But then again, this maybe reveals to us that we have not been as productive and as creative as we ought to be with our factories, because fine, COVID-19 has, brought up this, but how can we ensure that we don't go back to where we were and become more of a production nation than a consumption nation?
I think we need, there has been no will to really enforce, to ensure that the economy is moving towards a production-oriented, being a production-oriented economy, that imports would favor goods that are intermediate goods that can be used for further value addition domestically or for the manufacture of what we want to do. For example, if you take the policy on Mitumba, it's on the one hand, one can argue that, of course, Mitumba have really helped to improve the quality of clothing or even clothing at all for many people of medium or low income, or particularly low income ones. When recently they put some restraint on it using the public health law, actually that was good news for our local manufacturers, because then they get room to be able to do many of the things that are being imported through the Mitumba or the clothing, but also the vehicles in Kenya. In Kenya, you can see that getting second-hand vehicles it has become really the order of the day, and local assemblies are struggling. Even government itself is not buying from the local, or it's not buying enough. It should be buying entirely from locally assembled vehicles, whichever those vehicles are, as agreed. We have ignored that part. For me, I think it's a question of class competition. I think we have a captive state in these recent administrations that we've got, where the interests of the consumer interests of that class are the ones that are being translated into policy, and our trade regime is de facto reflecting that.
Right.
I bet that if one was to analyze the composition of our imports, you'd find the Mitumbas in the clothing sector, the second-hand vehicle markets in the vehicles sector, and even the food sector. The imports of food items, final food items for final consumption is very high. Some people have argued that because we are a UN agency, we have UN agencies here, and we have different tastes and preferences and so on, but I bet it's much bigger than what the UN agencies can consume. So I think that we have really to sit back and look at our value systems, where we want to take this country. And with that, you can then translate that into policy and regulations across the sectors.
All right. Do you think it would be an idea to come up with laws that would make it more difficult to import and easier to consume what is locally made, that way boosting and promoting what is local? For instance, you've mentioned the mitumba industry, and it's huge, but we do have factories that can make those clothes. And as a result, do you think then maybe we should have laws that make it more difficult to import and easier to buy locally produced products?
Absolutely, we should have those laws in place, and even within the constraints of the international protocols on the fact that you can't block, just straight away block goods, but you can use tariffs to get there, make it more costly to import, and at the same time, therefore, relatively speaking, make it cheaper to use locally imported ones. And of course, the factories would not, there would have to be other corresponding policies to ensure that factories don't then just sit back and make the big profits out of the protection, because if they did that, government has ways in which they can easily correct that through taxation and so on. So I really think that it's time for the national debate to get some consensus on it, for people to understand the costs, the implications of that locally, the cheaper imported used vehicle, what it does to the industry locally. Two, it's also important to let people understand the implications of that dress code, that is Mutumba code, all the way from clothes close to the skin to the outer clothes. And I think that is something that needs really to be looked at seriously.
Absolutely.
How come countries like, even in the region, in Rwanda, Mitumbas are not allowed. Uganda has restricted them severely. I do not know if they're still on that same mode. Countries like India, you do not find Mitumbas, have no market there. So we really have to think, carefully, and we just can't run along each time the easy road.
Absolutely. All right, let's look at other stories. We also are, of course, in the midst of a pandemic, the COVID-19. On page 4 of the Standard, Ministry records decline in corona cases by 3.4%. But there's also an article in the Daily Nation that talks about Nairobi metropolitan area, the new COVID-19 epicenter. Maybe just to get an idea of what's happening in the constituencies and out of the, the Nairobi and all that, but perhaps to tell us how things are in your constituency, say in regards to COVID-19 awareness and whether people have really taken this seriously and whether we are seeing a decline.
Michael, there is no decline. Technically, and I think it's very embarrassing. The minister, Mr. Kagwe, must come out and get a briefing from his statistical people and tell the country. The testing has reached about 300,000 people, they say. It's too small a number to be able to tell that as a republic, as a country, that the cases are going, which direction they are going. We do not know. The most they can say is from what we have looked at, but we have stopped looking, and that's the truth of the matter. Mombasa suddenly now has no cases. Why? Because they want to support tourism. Eastleigh had a lot of cases. Oh, no, suddenly we stopped because the community complained. Busia, they are all testing, and we are a border county. They are testing only the truckers. What about the impact of the truckers on the communities? The testing has stopped. It's not going on. So I think they should really come out clearly first and tell us how they are moving on the testing, before we can begin to tell statistically that we are flattening the curve. There's too much eagerness. You can just draw a flat curve. It won't be the curve of the country. So I think that the government is trying really hard, but the government has not gotten there. I think the honest is to say this is how we are moving. But this is how the pandemic is moving, even more faster and more broadly than we are doing. We are struggling on this. That's an honest communication. The country will buy into it. We'll work together with government. But data like this is really misinformation.
And maybe also to speak to the impact of what that's likely to happen, because with information that the numbers might be coming down, there's likely to be a relaxation by residents. And of course, over time, that's going to have a very negative effect on our health sector. It's already overburdened, but it's likely now to have a negative effect, but also the ripple effect of that even on our health.
It is absolutely, and of course, I understand, just like you've said, the reason why governments are tempted to go this direction, and I guess that they have to balance off. But whatever they're balancing off, one of the things to do is to get the community to join in and go on with the struggle. There are countries around the world, even in the US, where they said, well, this problem is extremely intractable. We can't wait for it to get over. As one of the lead doctors said, it's going to become a smoldering cauldron. There'll always be a fire, but like some volcanoes go low, but they still exist. This is the reality we have to deal with. And in that process, therefore, we're going to open the economy, we are going to relax, but this is what you must do. The danger is still great. But I don't think we should give the impression that the thing is coming down. If you have a capacity of 300 beds in a county, and we have 1,000 cases, for example, where are the 700? They're in the community. And as you know now, these days, people are dying, and each time they die, if they're in hospital, it's COVID. If they're outside, it's not mentioned. So right. I think we really must bring out this and get to a level of openness and truthfulness, and then from there we can all work together. We can't blame government for COVID, so they don't have to be in a corner in which they think they should protect their name and image. This is a matter that is for all of us. We must work together.
Absolutely. And maybe as we wind up, just another article here: vulnerable families locked out of cash transfer scheme. We do know that the government had put in place a cash transfer scheme to ensure that they alleviated, particularly those who are very vulnerable and poor, the old, but it seems to be, having problems in getting to it. And this again is another area of concern, given that the budget is already there, but the money is not reaching those that need the money.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I think our management of social protection policies, including this social protection during the COVID era, has had a lot of problems. One obvious problem is lack of transparency. There's no reason to hide who gets this kind of cash transfer. And because it's kept under secrecy, you get odd cases. One of my colleagues complained last week or the other week, I forget exactly when, he said, well, my wife is receiving the COVID cash transfer. She didn't apply for it. She's never asked for it. And we shouldn't be receiving this. We have told the government to say, the authorities to say, no, this is a wrong transfer. How many such cases exist? And in any case, government has had extremely good databases that other countries do not easily have. We had our census in 2009, which could have been used. Now we have a recent one, but we had Huduma. The Huduma number data that was collected would show exactly the household incomes, so that monies can go to those households. And it's not a secret to be below the poverty line. So I really think that the lack of transparency, we don't even know if government is transferring the amount of money they're saying they're transferring. The oversight institutions are not able to see, to prove that the quantum of funds being transferred is X or Y. So all of this is halfway between the level of could you say, PR,
right,
and some truth somewhere. So I really think, Michael, that this should come out more clearly. It should be more transparent. It should be done in a conjunction with, say, the volume units, and the information should be available somewhere one can access. I can't access, for example, the people who are receiving that support in my constituency. I know extremely poor people that aren't receiving that. We have to do food donations as a private arrangement, whatever we can do. And those that are receiving it are quiet somewhere. We don't know.
We don't know.
So there is a lot that needs to come out.
All right. Thank you, Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, Member of Parliament for Nambale, for joining us this morning to review some of the stories making headlines. In now 7:30, we're going to take a short break. But a quick reminder of that question that we're asking, and would like to hear what your take is this morning. Share your views on the events surrounding the prolonged Senate standoff over revenue sharing. Share your views. And I'll just read a few before we take this break. We have Yobs, who says nothing, but Mr. President should leave alone the Senate. We have Wanya, who says that it is undergoing transformation. It has no brain of its own. We have Vekin, who says the Senate of Kenya has lost its integrity and is controlled by external forces. I'll read one more before we take the break. Let the House exercise its constitutional right and don't blindfold the lawmakers in broad daylight. Share your